Hey there, happy artists. Thanks for joining me today. Right now, what I'm doing is I'm sitting down for color mixing to get ready for my next painting, which is going to be of a salt shaker. And I've got a picture that I'll put up of my subject off on the right of this screen. So if you guys want to mix some colors along with me of the exact same subject, then you can do that. Now, I'm going to have a picture up on the right side, but just to be clear, I will be painting from a reference for this. So colors may look a little bit different on the photo, but you'll get the basic idea and be able to work alongside me if you want to. So I'm doing this painting with, for the most part, just the primary colors. And that's how I do most of my paintings. Usually the only colors I use are red, yellow, and blue. I do have a bunch of other colors on this one though, off to the right hand side. And what these are is they're paint colors that I mixed for my previous painting. And I didn't want to just throw those paints away, and I didn't really have anything in mind for them. So I've just set them here off to the side, and I think what I'm going to use them for is, number one, I'll use them to get pretty close to the colors that I want for this painting without, having to go directly from the primaries for every single one. And also, I think that some of these colors would be really cool candidates for like some color pops in this painting. I love like really random touches of color to show up in a painting sometimes that aren't necessarily realistic, but just kind of look cool. So yeah, that's what those paints are over there. Also, I've got a sticky note that I wrote out for the main thing that I want to focus on in this painting. And I recommend that as a tool for making sure that every time you sit down to a painting, you're still trying something new. And I mentioned that a little bit in a YouTube video, but as I'm mixing or painting along, at some point I'll talk more about that. But just so you guys know what I have in mind while I'm doing the mixing and doing the painting. Sorry if you heard that. I've got some wires taped up, and my tape isn't super duper strong. This is still a work in progress over here. I promise we'll get better and better though. I'm slapping another piece of tape on, so hopefully this wire doesn't move anymore. But yeah, so I wrote down color sharing, and I'm going to be looking at this sticky note throughout my painting process, because this is the main thing that I want to focus on and improve on in my painting. And just so you know what color sharing is, that's when light bounces up off of a subject and onto another one and kind of shares that color onto another piece. So if you look at the picture of my salt shaker, you'll see that if you look towards the bottom of the salt shaker, parts of the salt shaker may have like a little bit of a pink twinge to it, whatever the word is for that. You can especially notice it maybe if you look at the bottom of that salt shaker, like right where the last of the salt is, the whitish part, you might see that it's got like a little bit of a pink glow to it, and that's called color sharing. And when you do that, it lends a lot of realistic, however you say it, it adds realism to the thing that you're painting. It's just like a little subtle touch, but it can make a big difference. And I'm very bad at color sharing. It's something that my mentor has told me that I need to pay more attention to. So I'm using this mixing and this painting as an opportunity to try and get a little bit better at it. So that's my sticky note. I encourage you to break out a sticky note, and whenever you do a painting, try to find one thing that you want to work on. either that you want to get better at or something new that you want to try. It can ensure that you keep on growing, that your style keeps developing, and that you continue to challenge yourself. Alright, so let's get started with a little bit of color mixing. If you want to know the exact paints that I've got and all my materials and all that, take a look at the description for this video, and it'll have all the info on there. So my goal in mixing colors isn't to get the absolute perfect color that's not going to change at all through the painting. That can be pretty tricky to do. The main thing that I'm aiming for with mixing these colors is, number one, to get like a light, medium, and dark color for each area of the painting. So what I mean by that is, say we look at the background. I want to mix a light, medium, and dark color green for that. That's, at least kind of close. Same thing for, the white salt portion of the Saltshaker. I want to get a light, medium, and dark. And for some of these, I might just get like a medium and dark if I don't feel like I need to do 3 different values for each area. But that's what I want to focus on in this mixing. And the accuracy of the color isn't as important to me as the accuracy of the lightness or darkness. So I'm going to push the colors around throughout the painting. They're going to change, but I want to do reasonably well at getting the lightness and darkness, because that's what's going to really give a lot of punch and realism to the painting. That's your big win, is when you get the values correct. And values means lights and darks. So I'm going to look at my subject now, and I think for starters, I'm going to focus on getting the green background colors of the piece. And I've actually got like kind of a pretty cool green right there, but I think I might save that for an area of the Saltshaker. So I'm going to mix my own green from scratch for the background. So I'll get started with blue and yellow. Of course, is going to make the green. And you almost always want to throw in a little bit of every color. That's why I threw a dab of red in there. Because if you just mix these colors straight, they're going to be way too vivid. They're not going to look real. And I know for sure that even in the shadows that I'm going to want to mix white in, because these mixtures create a real dark color. So I'm throwing in a little bit of white in there from the get-go as well. The first part of the background that I'm mixing is going to be the shadow. So just so you know, that's what I'm going for starters. And I'll get the lighter stuff afterwards. So right now, I'm just eyeballing it. I'm not comparing the color of my paint to the color of the subject with anything other than just my eyes. But now I've got a color that I'm ready to test. And the way you want to test your colors is to hold your paint up next to the subject. And it's also important that you hold it up under the same light if you're going for accuracy. Now, if it doesn't matter too much that you get it exactly, you can just make sure you hold it up under a consistent light. So if I wanted to be super accurate, I would stretch this out and make sure I've got it right under the exact same light that's shining on my subject. And I can kind of squint if I want to get darkness and lightness correct. I can open my eyes real wide if I want to get the color portion correct. And as it stands right now, this color is actually way darker than the real thing over there. But I'm actually going to go with that because sometimes it's nice to make your painting a little bit darker than the real thing. The reason for that is the lighter you go with paints, the more color tends get robbed away from the mixture. And if you've ever heard the term chalky before, that's the reason why people get chalky paintings, is because they're trying to match the lightness of a subject, but they don't realize that the more white you throw in, the more color just gets leached out. And that's just one of the limitations of paint. And it's the same if, I don't know if you're using acrylics while you're watching me, or oils, or gouache, or whatever, but that's the case with all paints. The colors can get stripped away if you go too light. So if you want your painting to be a little more colorful, you can kind of tip everything towards a little bit of a darker shade, and it's going to look more vivid at the end than it would otherwise. Alright, so I don't need a ton of paint actually for any of this. My plan is to paint on a 5x7" piece of gesso board, which should be interesting. I've actually never used gesso board before, so I guess technically I'm doing two new things, but I didn't have anything 5x7 other than this new gesso board I just picked up, and I really like the idea of putting the salt on a 5x7 sort of ratio, so we'll just go with it. Who cares if we're doing a bunch of new stuff? If I totally flop on this one, then I've learned some valuable lessons. So I said I want to go for light, medium, dark for all of these. And now I'm going to go for the medium for the background. So obviously it's a little bit lighter than the shadow. Fair bit lighter than the shadow. And I want my color changes to tell a story too. So I want to decide if objects in the light are either warmer or cooler in color compared to the objects in the shadow. And I think this is like kind of a warm light. Let's see. Honestly, I'm not super good at judging warm versus cool light at this point. But yeah, actually maybe that's a cool light. I don't know. Once I figure out that great secret, I'll make sure to let you know. But yeah, let's go with the assumption that light is actually cooler and the shadows are warmer. And so I'm going to add a little bit more blue as I get lighter. And that's just going to make the changes in value a little bit more interesting and realistic. There we go. So that's a lighter and cooler color. And another thing to know is whenever you add white to a color, that's also going to cool it down. So it's going to push it towards blue. That's what cool generally means. So just kind of a good thing to know. I'll throw a little bit of this to the side just because I don't need too much lightness, and I don't know, maybe I'll need more of that mid-tone color later. I'll put it off to the side. That way I can make like a warmer or cooler version of that color, and I don't know, maybe add some visual interest later on. Towards the end of a painting is when I really like to mess around with adding pops of color, subtle color changes. Maybe it's better to do that the first time to be more efficient, but I don't know. At this point, when I'm painting, that's the time when I'm really thinking about pops, is towards the end. Pops of color changes. Alright, so I've got the background, and I'm moving pretty slowly through this, but I got a lot to say today. What can I say? Let's do the foreground now, just so we can knock both of those out of the way. And I think I'm going to use this magenta-ish sort of color that I had in my last painting, and maybe use that for the base. Just because I've got a lot of that paint, and I don't know where else I might use it. And it's going to be pretty close to what I'm going for. So I'll get a little bit of light, medium, dark set out there. That way each of these has a little bit of this paint. And that'll give a bit of continuity to the colors. It'll make it feel like all the colors in the piece are somewhat related to each other. That's a neat little hack with painting is, and actually I guess you could call that color sharing also. If you've got a little bit of all of your paint spread out all over the piece, it adds some uniformity to it. As opposed to, I don't know, if the bottom of your painting was just like this peachy reddish color or whatever, and that's the only place in the entire painting that had that, your painting would end up looking, I don't know, kind of like divided up. It's a little hard to explain, but hopefully as I'm going along I can talk a little bit more about that and express what I'm saying. A great opportunity for color sharing that peachy stuff later on will be the top stainless steel part of that salt. It's catching a lot of reflected light off of there, and it's also going to be the top 2/3 of the painting. So I can throw some of that peachy color in that reflection, and that's going to help to just tie those two colors together. So I'm mixing the colors here, and I'm going to start with the shadow. And using my eyes, I can tell right now that the shadow is cooler than this. And it is going to be a warm shadow still, because light is uniform. So if you have a cool light, every single part of your painting is going to have a cool light, unless you've got multiple light sources. And so if you've got one light source, then every single shadow is going to be warmer in tone than the stuff around it. And I'll come up with some kind of a YouTube video probably once I consolidate my thoughts on that and think of a great way to explain it. It's honestly something I'm not strong in yet, but I know I'll get better over time the more I think about it. So I'm holding this up. I'm going to get under the exact same light for this, and right now this color is way too vivid. It's also probably a little too dark, but the thing that really stands out is this looks so dang purple when I hold it up. So I'm mixing in the complementary color of purple to neutralize it a bit. And look at that, see how it kind of gets brown when I put that in? That's because yellow and purple are complementary colors. So when you mix them together, they get a little bit closer to gray. So now I'm holding this out again. It still looks super duper purple. And honestly, I need this to like have some of the reddish peachish character. So let's mix in some more of this yellow and a little bit more of this red. The thing about using your primaries to get all your colors is it's so cool to see that you can literally get any color within the restrictions of paint. You can get any color by mixing those three together. And it can take some trial and error. It takes a while to get good at it. But once you do, man, you get some color mastery. It's a good tool to have. Alright, so I lightened this up with some white. I probably made that a little bit too light, but it is much closer in color to what I'm going for. Let's throw some blue, throw some red, purple it up just a little bit more. And if this ends up being too light, I can tweak it. I know I can. Alright, so for our mid-tone, I'm throwing in a bit of this dark brown goodness. And so there's a pattern on the foreground and the background. I don't know if I'm gonna include the pattern or not. It's not really what I'm going for in the painting. As I said, I'm going for color sharing. So I might ignore those details and kind of just go for my main goal. Alright, so we'll work with that. That's a fair mid-tone. I also don't have a huge goal for color accuracy, at least in this painting. Color accuracy doesn't matter to me too much compared to other stuff. Alright. We'll lighten it up a little bit and we'll cool it a little bit. Cool. I like it. Alright, so we have our background and foreground elements together. And you may notice that I don't completely mix together my colors. I know some people like really want to make sure that you don't have those swoops of other colors showing up. But partly I'm lazy and don't want to super mix everything. I also tend to get arm injuries, so I don't want to put all of my, arm budget into completely mixing something. If it means that, I could paint for 20 minutes longer or something if I just kind of left it unmixed. But another of the benefits is if you leave stuff with like little hints of the colors, it can kind of give your color a little bit of vibrancy, I guess, for lack of a better word. It gives like a shimmer to the colors a bit when stuff isn't completely mixed together. So that's one of the reasons why I do that. Let's go for the metal stainless steel portion. And I can see that some of those colors in the stainless steel are also sort of on the edges of the glass. And I promise I'll talk a lot more about painting glass too as we go along, because that's an interesting challenge. But there's a lot of cool rules I can share with you on ways to make that easier. Gosh, I kind of like that color. I'm sure it's, well, yeah. I like the value, the darkness. Let's just roll with that and see where it takes us. Next I need a mid-tone. And you see I've got these big blobs of paint. I don't know if they look big to you. They look big to me. This is a bit of overkill for a 5x7 painting, but you do not want to run out of paint if you can help it. There's nothing worse than having to stop your painting and mix together an exact replica of a color that you'd mixed before because you ran out of it. It's just annoying. It's hard to get the exact color again. And what else was I gonna say about that? Oh yeah, so a lot of times if you're short on paint, then you try to spread a little bit out as far as it can go, and you paint super duper thin, and in my opinion, ain't a good look. If you glob on paint, I think it's just a better effect than if you go super duper thin. I'm sure that some people disagree with me and just love painting thinly, but in my humble opinion, a painting looks a lot better when you don't skimp on your paint. Alright, so those look pretty metallic. That's a good start. And now, so I've got 3 more things I need to do. I need to get some colors for the glass. I need to get some colors for the salt. And then I need to think about that color sharing and find interesting little pops that maybe I want to pre-mix before I get started. So let's do the salt next. Kind of excited about that. When you think of salt, you think of white. But there are so many billions of different whites. White isn't just white, and you know that if you've ever tried to like match white walls and you've gotten some white paint, you throw it on the wall and suddenly it looks pink compared to what's on your wall already. So white is just a super high value color with, very little saturation to it, very little color to it, but little touches of saturation inform what white you've got. So I want to give some kind of flavor to this white. And looking at my subject, I see like a really dull purple kind of shade to it. And so this gunk up here is actually a pretty good candidate for that. The stuff that I used for the stainless steel. If I mix a little bit of that in, that's, it's still white to an onlooker, but this conveys some of the character of the salt that I'm looking at. Also, you'll see that, so the salt that I'm painting now is darker than, my main blob of titanium white up there. And the reason why that's a good thing is that's going to give me some elbow room to use my brightest white for highlights. Namely the highlights that you'll see on that stainless steel on the top. If you want to convey the effect of something being like really shiny, you have to make sure that that shine is way brighter than the next thing. Otherwise it's not going to stand out. So I may even want to make my salt darker than this. In fact, I'm going to. People are going to know it's salt. Trust me. It doesn't have to be super duper white. If the values make sense compared to the other ones, and the color makes sense next to the other ones, then that viewer is going to know exactly what it is. And so I've got another blob down here, and I want to make this blob pinkish because I know I've got some color sharing going on. So I'm going to take just some of this ground mixture, throw it in there, and this will be the salt as it catches the light from the floor. That's me thinking about color sharing. It's so easy to get overwhelmed with all these concerns and things you're focusing on when you're painting. And then by the end of it, you realize, oh man, I forgot to do that main thing I was aiming for the whole time. So that's why it's nice to have a little sticky note to help yourself out. So now I'm considering this like kind of a, light to mid-tone salt color. And now I want to get a bit of a darker salt color. This is going to be salt in the shadow. You'll see that like along the edges of where the salt touches the glass, and then some areas where the glass casts a shadow onto the salt that's a bit darker. And I want to show that in my painting. So, yeah, we'll work with that. I don't think I'm going to need a ton of that color, but I want to mix it now. And then the last thing we got to do is the glass. Now the thing about glass is, in the case of this glass, it's obviously transparent. So conveying that something is glass, it's an interesting science to do it. One good thing to know about how light responds to glass is the colors you see through the glass are usually going to look a teensy bit darker than if you didn't have the glass there. And it's also going to look a teensy bit duller, so the color won't be quite as vibrant. So a big way that I can take a step towards conveying that this is glass is take a look at that green in the background that you see when you're looking at that Saltshaker. So that's like this mid-tone green. When I come to this in the glass, I'll make it a teensy bit darker and a teensy bit duller. And remember, you get dull by mixing the complementary color. So I'll throw a tiny bit of red in there. That'll dull it out, and that'll help the viewer's eye to understand that we're looking through glass. We also have some areas on this glass that look real dark. And I think for starters, I'm going to use some of the stainless steel colors to convey that, because it's kind of like a greenish, grayish sort of hue. So I'm not going to mix that right now. And then also there are areas in the glass where light is being reflected. And I think I'm going to mix as I get to that too. But a big win is to take a look at those reflections and put a color to them. Decide, does that reflection look like a little bit blue, or does it look a little yellow? And putting that on is a good win. So I'm pretty happy with this as a starting point for the painting. I will be doing additional color mixing as I go. I'll be fixing the colors that I got wrong. I'll be tweaking things. But for a first pass, these will be good colors to let me get started. So thanks for watching along with me. Thanks for mixing along with me. For the next video, we'll be tackling that salt shaker. Thanks, you guys. Happy painting.